The US dollar has been the world's reserve currency since the end of World War II. This supremacy has given the United States considerable power over the global economy. However, fractures are beginning to develop in the dollar's once unshakable position, raising questions about whether its supremacy is genuinely sustainable. Let's start with the data that's causing waves in financial markets. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the dollar's share in global foreign exchange reserves has declined from a peak of 72% in 2000 to roughly 55% in 2024. This is hardly a sudden decline. It has been steadily declining over 2 decades, reflecting a loss of trust among central banks in the US dollar. But why should this matter? When central banks maintain reserves, they are effectively putting their confidence in the currency's stability. The US dollar has long been the chosen currency since it was regarded as stable, reliable, and supported by the world's greatest economy. However, the progressive decline in dollar reserves implies that governments are beginning to wonder whether the dollar still merits its privileged status. So, is the dollar in decline? Let us find out. Countries that have been sanctioned by the United States have seen a decline in dollar use. Russia, for example, has steadily reduced its dollar holdings. In reaction to sanctions implemented following the invasion of Crimea in 2014, Russia reduced its dollar reserves from roughly 60% to less than 10% now. Instead, it has shifted to owning euros, Chinese yuan, and gold. In the last 2 years, Russia's central bank has acquired more than 200 tons of gold, indicating that it is hedging against the dangers linked with the dollar. Another major signal of the currency's collapse is the increase of bilateral trade agreements that do not use the dollar. Let us look at the numbers. China and Russia, for example, now transact roughly 30% of their bilateral commerce in their own currencies, up from only 3% a decade earlier. In 2023, India negotiated deals with nations such as the UAE to settle oil purchases in rupees, a step that seemed impossible only a few years before. China, the world's largest exporter, is vigorously promoting the use of the yuan in global commerce, particularly through central bank digital currency CBDCs. China is leading the way with its digital yuan, which is already being utilized in test projects in key cities and for cross-border transactions. In 2024, the People's Bank of China stated that the digital yuan had handled more than $300 billion in transactions, making it one of the world's most successful digital currency initiatives. But why do digital currencies pose such a danger to the dollar? Traditional financial transactions, particularly cross-border payments, are frequently conducted through the United States-controlled SWIFT network. However, with digital currencies, nations may completely circumvent SWIFT, lessening their reliance on the dollar. The Bank for International Settlements believes that about 80% of central banks are looking into digital currencies, with China, Russia, and India leading the way. As digital currencies gain acceptance, the United States may lose control over financial flows. Consider a situation in which Russia and China settle trade using digital yuan, or a BRICS-backed digital currency. This would dramatically lower demand for dollars and weaken the United States' control over the global financial system. As trust in the dollar declines, central banks are turning to gold as a safe haven. According to the World Gold Council, central banks will buy more than 1,000 tons of gold in 2023, the most since the 1960s. Turkey, India, and Germany have been increasing their gold stockpiles to protect against currency volatility. However, with Trump's re-election, some are debating if Trump's policies can change the direction of the dollar's slide or if it is too late to reverse the trend. Here's a reminder to like, and subscribe to our channel for more videos on geopolitics, the economy, and the shifting world. Let us proceed immediately. Donald Trump's surprise return to the White House in 2024 has added another degree of complication to the already unpredictable global financial environment. Trump's re-election has sent shockwaves across Wall Street and other foreign capitals. His reputation for unpredictability, along with his America First agenda, has placed the globe on edge once more, as analysts try to forecast how his policies will affect the global economy and, most significantly, the dollar. During his first term, Trump was recognized for aggressively using economic penalties and tariffs to achieve foreign policy goals. His government levied sanctions on nations including as Iran, Venezuela, and Russia, using the dollar's strength as leverage. This method was successful in the near term, but it resulted in unexpected repercussions that are now haunting the dollar. Trump's return to office has sparked concerns that he would intensify his sanctions-heavy strategy. If Trump decides to reimpose sanctions, many more countries may seek alternatives to the currency. The BRICS members, already concerned of being subjected to U.S. sanctions, have stepped up their attempts to construct banking systems outside of U.S. control. According to a recent research from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the use of U.S. sanctions climbed by more than 30% during Trump's first term. However, the aggressive use of the dollar as a weapon has expedited de-dollarization efforts in countries on the receiving end. For example, after suffering sanctions, Iran and Russia dramatically decreased their dollar holdings and boosted their reliance on other currencies such as the Chinese yuan and euro. If Trump continues to weaponize the currency, it may accelerate its collapse. While the short-term consequence may be to squeeze opponents, the long-term outcome is likely to be a world in which countries deliberately want to reduce their reliance on the dollar in order to avoid being subject to U.S. sanctions. One of the most fascinating parts of Trump's return is his readiness to engage in negotiations with Russia. Despite the restrictions imposed by his administration, Trump has consistently indicated a willingness to engage in discussion with Moscow. In his first term, Trump hinted that he would relax sanctions against Russia in exchange for cooperation on a variety of geopolitical matters, including counterterrorism and energy security. With Trump back in power, there are early indications that he may attempt a reset in U.S.-Russia ties. According to sources at the Carnegie Moscow Center, Washington and Moscow are now in back-channel conversations regarding the prospect of relaxing sanctions in exchange for Russia's assistance on matters such as cybersecurity. If Trump follows through, it may briefly maintain the dollar's supremacy by lowering Russia's desire to completely commit to de-dollarization. However, this might result in unforeseen effects. While Russia may be inclined to increase its usage of the dollar if sanctions are repealed, the dollar's reputation as a trustworthy reserve currency has already suffered. Countries such as China, India, and even U.S. allies like Germany have seen how rapidly the U.S. can weaponize the dollar. This has resulted in a fundamental change in how these nations see their financial stability. So, what happens if the dollar falls? The risk of the dollar losing its place as the world's principal reserve currency is no longer just speculative. The acts of the BRICS nations, the emergence of digital currencies, and shifting geopolitical alignments all point to a future in which the dollar may no longer be dominant. But what does it mean for the global economy, and particularly for the United States? Let's begin with the most apparent consequence. If the dollar loses its role as the world's reserve currency, the United States will experience a significant economic shock. The United States can currently afford to run significant budget deficits because its currency is in high demand across the world. As of 2024, the United States national debt is a whopping $33 trillion. The U.S. Treasury can fund this debt at very low interest rates because foreign governments, institutions, and investors want to buy U.S. bonds, which are seen as safe assets. If demand for the dollar falls, the U.S. Treasury will struggle to find purchasers for its debt. To entice investors, the government would have to provide higher interest rates, raising borrowing costs. According to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, a 1% increase in interest rates would add $250 billion in debt payment expenses per year. This is money that might have been spent on infrastructure, healthcare, or social services. The ripple effects would be felt across the United States economy. More borrowing costs might result in more taxes, decreased government spending, and weaker economic development. The United States might even see stagflation, in which inflation remains high as economic growth stagnates. As the value of the dollar falls, imports become more expensive, driving up inflation even higher. The dollar's declining demand would have an impact on more than simply government budgets. It would have a significant impact on American consumers. The cost of ordinary commodities, particularly imports such as electronics, vehicles, and gasoline, would rise dramatically, limiting buying power. While a decrease in the dollar may appear to be a success for nations such as China and Russia, it will have mixed consequences for developing economies. Many emerging nations are highly indebted in dollars. According to World Bank data, approximately 60% of developing market debt is denominated in dollars. If the dollar's value falls, these nations will face increased debt repayment obligations, perhaps leading to a wave of defaults. Take Argentina, for example. For decades, the government has been plagued by debt issues, owing in large part to its obligations to the currency. If the dollar falls, Argentina's debt load rises, compelling the government to slash expenditure or raise taxes, both of which might spark civil discontent. The same is true for nations such as Turkey, Brazil, and South Africa, which have considerable dollar-denominated debt. However, there is a flip side to this. As the dollar falls, emerging markets that rely on exports to the United States may profit. A weakened dollar would make their products more competitive in foreign markets, potentially increasing exports and GDP. According to an International Trade Center research, a 10% drop in the value of the dollar may boost exports from developing nations by up to 5%. The dollar's depreciation will have an unequal impact on emerging markets. Countries with diverse economies and strong export industries may profit, whilst those largely reliant on dollar-denominated debt would suffer. Now, if the dollar loses its supremacy, what happens? The most likely scenario is not a single currency replacing the dollar, but a multipolar financial system in which numerous currencies coexist. According to a Council on Foreign Relations research, the United States is already looking into measures to fight the spread of digital currencies, notably China's digital yuan. In 2023, the Federal Reserve said that it was looking into the possibility of creating a U.S. central bank digital currency, CBDC. If the United States is successful in launching a digital dollar, it will be able to maintain its power in the global financial system. The United States has the resources to prevent the dollar's slide, but it will need to move quickly and strategically. If Washington fails to adapt, it may find itself marginalized in a new global economic system. Do you think the dollar's collapse is now a reality? Can this be stopped? Let us know in the comments section. What should the U.S. do to prevent de-dollarization? Would you want to see more videos like this one? If so, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell symbol next to it. Thank you for viewing and stay tuned for the next video.